Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This week we're going to be talking about clothing. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about tops and their fabrics and how that can help us conceal. I want to kind of preface this video with something though. Personally, I do believe that making good choices with our holster, our clips, our belts, all of those things can make the most difference with our concealment. Selecting good tops that are helpful for concealment are just that, they're helpful. But ultimately, I want to encourage you guys in a direction of making great choices with your holster selection and everything that goes into that part of concealment. And our clothing is only an aid. So with that, let's get right into it. Really quick, I just want to kind of establish what printing actually means. Printing is essentially when you can see the outline of your gun through your cover garment. And for me personally, as a concealed carrier, printing is a really big deal to me because I am a concealed carrier for a reason. I don't want my firearm revealed to the strangers around me. So I like to prevent printing as much as I possibly can. And that goes hand in hand with making really great holster choices and things like that. But making good choices with our clothing is also really helpful. So moving right along, I want to first talk about linen. Linen is one of the easiest fabrics to conceal in. It was my best friend when I was first learning how to conceal, and I didn't quite understand how to get the grip of my gun angled in, and I struggled with printing at first. Linen pretty much obliterated that struggle for me, and I was able to conceal with no problem with it. So especially if you're just starting out or you're kind of transitioning and maybe to a larger concealed carry gun, linen can be really helpful with that. And there's reasons for that. So linen has a structure of its own. Something that I'm sure that we're all aware of when it comes to linen is that it wrinkles really easily, unfortunately. And that just kind of comes with the territory. If that's something that bothers you, I totally understand. You can forget about linen, that's fine. But linen does come with a lot of pros, especially in the summertime as concealed carriers. Not only does it really help with printing, but it wicks moisture really easily and quickly. It's actually one of the fabrics that does that job the best. So I live in the desert. I visit Arizona very regularly, and I pretty much only wear linen when I go to those areas and when it's the dead of summer. So I really appreciate that fabric for that reason. It's also just very breathable and helpful for that. And if you've not carried your gun in the summertime yet, you will learn that it does get a little bit sweaty sometimes. And, you know, wearing a layer between yourself and your Kydex holster can help with that. But also selecting fabrics that are breathable can be super helpful with that. Another really great thing about linen that's not at all concealment related is that it is actually one of the less hospitable fabrics for bacteria to grow on. So that means that you actually don't have to wash it as much as you would with your other tops. I definitely have tops that feel like after just one wash, and I have to wash them. But with my linen, wool, cashmere tops, I don't have to wash them every time. That could be a pro if you care about that. I'm the one doing the laundry in the house, so I care about that. So next I want to talk about cashmere and wool. I'm lumping them together because they function the same way, but they are a little bit different. So cashmere actually comes from a very specific kind of goat called the cashmere goat. And they're a little bit more rare. The process is a little bit more extensive. And that's actually why cashmere is so expensive. Wool comes from sheep, and as I understand it, the process is just a little bit less tedious. So you can find wool, merino wool, for lower prices than you can typically find cashmere. I personally thrift a lot of my clothes, so I can find those things for really decent prices. So some things that you want to be aware of when you're looking into those things is extra fine merino wool is going to be a little bit less durable, but it's going to be a lot softer. So if you have previously had issues with the itchy feeling that comes with wool, you might try an extra fine merino wool. I personally am wearing that right now, and I never have felt any itch with that type of merino wool. And cashmere is so soft. The thing that you want to be aware of when you're buying cashmere is a 1-ply is usually going to be really fragile. You want to look for a 2-ply cashmere. So now that you have some shopping instructions and understanding of what those two things are, they function not the same as linen, but similarly. Again, they're a natural fiber, so they have a lot of their own structure to them, and they tend to resist static. So that is really helpful in not actually clinging to yourself and therefore imprinting around your gun. But also it tends to just kind of like bunch a lot easier than other fabrics, which again is another distracting thing from your gun as well. And I personally have never had any issues when I'm concealing in a top that is made of those natural fibers. Although when I wear a wool that is mixed with a larger amount of polyester, so if I'm wearing like 80% polyester mixed with 20% wool, that typically doesn't function as well. And for some reason, the mixture makes it itchy. So kind of be wary of the mixtures with the polyester. It can be great, but it can also really suck as far as concealment and comfort goes. Another thing to be aware of with wool and cashmere is that it can be a little bit of a more tedious process when it comes to washing them. Wool and cashmere are also fabrics that resist bacteria. So they're almost, I would say, self-cleaning fabrics. You shouldn't have to wash them unless you dirty them, if that makes sense. If they don't appear to be dirty and they don't smell to be dirty, they don't need to be cleaned. That might sound gross, but it's just a matter of fact about those fabrics. And that is a major reason why a lot of people really love them. They last longer for that reason because you're not having to wash them so often. And then when you do have to wash them, you do have to be really delicate with them. So I never ever dry clean mine because I've actually read that it can be harsh on those clothes to dry clean them. So I wash all of my merino and cashmere and silk and linen in cold water, and then I lay them flat to dry. So there's some laundry instructions for you. Moving right along to silk. So silk is a really, really great fabric for concealment because often it has a bit of a sheen to it, which can be really, really distracting from any kind of printing. And then again, it does have a structure of its own. So it can struggle with static a little bit more than these other fabrics that I've already talked about. But for the most part, it has a structure of its own. It has a sheen to it, which the sheen distracts from printing, and having that structure keeps it from printing around the gun. It sits off of your body unless you're wearing something that's too tight for you. One of the downsides to silk though is that it can be a really warm fabric to wear. So if you live in a really hot area and you're wearing a lot of silk, it can get kind of hot. I personally am not bothered by it. And again, I live in the desert. It gets really, really hot here in the summertime. And if I'm wearing a shirt, like a t-shirt or a tank top that's made out of silk, I'm perfectly fine. I think that the heat that is kind of conducted with silk is usually paired with like wearing a silk pant or a silk wrap top or something that's a lot of it. But if you're wearing something that is just less fabric in general, you have that airflow regardless. Even though silk tends to struggle with static a little bit more than the other fabrics do, it's also a very slippery, more luxurious kind of fabric. So it actually tends to slip off of your gun, if that makes sense. It's less likely to catch on the grip of the gun or something like that, or the rear sight or something. It's just more slippery, so it tends to essentially slide off of it and to prevent printing that way. Something to also keep in mind when it comes to static is if you live in drier, colder climates, so say you live in Arizona in the dead of winter, that's actually when static is at its worst. So wearing silk at that time of the year will actually make a difference versus wearing it in the dead of summer when it's hotter. And then also like in a place like Georgia where it's super duper humid, or Florida where it's super humid, static isn't really as much of an issue. Humidity is and heat is, but static is not as much of an issue when it comes to wearing silks. Next, I want to talk about one of the most popular fabrics in the entire world, and that is cotton. We all have cotton in our closet, whether it's a blend or a full cotton top. And they tend to be a little bit hotter in the summertime, but if you have a good cotton shirt, it is going to have, again, a structure of its own. Cotton does retain water a little bit more than, say, a fabric like linen would, but it still does have that natural fiber quality about it. So it has that structure of its own, especially if you're wearing something that's even a little bit bigger on you. It is much less likely to, again, cling to your gun and print around it. Not all cotton is made alike. Not all cotton is processed the same. Not all cotton is grown the same. It has a lot of variation to it. Some of the most comfortable and soft cottons are Egyptian, Pima cotton, and Sea Island cotton. And that just has to do with the way that it's grown and the way that it's processed. But for whatever reason, those cottons are a lot softer, and I've not noticed that the softness makes the difference in concealment. That's just a part of the comfort process. I tend to prefer them because I like things to be soft. But again, cotton does have that own structure. So if you're wearing that, especially with a shirt underneath it, it's going to typically interact with your gun well. Because cotton tends to absorb water more so than any of the fabrics I've already talked about, it also tends to resist static a lot more than, say, a silk would or even wool. Each fabric really does have kind of its own pros and cons. Nothing is perfect, but for me, I find that linen conceals the most easily. It does wrinkle. Something to consider when you're looking into clothing for concealed carry is natural fibers. I find that this is all I buy anymore. Now that I carry and now that that is just a part of my life, I've kind of come to prefer natural fibers. Something to consider is getting blends amongst all of those fabrics. So one way to sort of get rid of all of that wrinkling that can come with linen is to buy a linen and wool blend or a linen and cotton blend. This is something that actually my husband really likes to wear, is a linen and wool blend, because it's still a super duper breathable fabric, but it looks really, really nice, and it has that concealment feature that linen does, but that less wrinkle factor that wool has. So mixing and matching the different fabrics together in clothing and tops can be really, really helpful to kind of take advantage of the best sides of each fabric. The last fabric that I want to talk about that is helpful for concealment is tencel. Tencel is not considered a natural fiber. It's technically made from a natural material. It's derived from wood pulp, but it goes through such a long process that it's considered a synthetic. So I wouldn't say that it comes with the breathability and the, natural fiber pros that come with the other fabrics, but tencel is a very similar fabric and functions really similarly to linen. Again, it does go through quite a process to make it into the fabric that it is from wood pulp to a fabric. But when you mix it with cotton, when you take a tencel and you mix it with cotton, it can actually be really wrinkle resistant, which can be really helpful for concealment, as you would imagine. So it kind of creates almost like a shield in front of your gun, if that makes sense, especially in like a button up. One of my favorite tops is, I think it's 100% tencel, and it's a button up, and I could probably hide a Desert Eagle under that shirt. Not that I would ever want to, but it just obliterates all struggles that I could be having with concealment. So honestly, some days are harder than others when it comes to concealing. Even though I'm carrying the same holster, the same gun, whatever, there can just be variations in my pants or how I'm feeling that day to make it more difficult to conceal. And it's really, really nice to have those shirts in your closet that are like, well, I could hide whatever I wanted under this shirt, so I'm just going to throw this on today because I don't want to figure it out. If that makes sense. If you've been carrying for any amount of time, you will have probably had a day like that and wish that you had a shirt like that. Thanks for watching today's video. I really hope that these tips about fabrics and natural fibers were really helpful for you. I know I probably didn't talk about guns as much as you're used to, but I personally have found these things to be really helpful for me. So I just wanted to get a video out there sharing these things that I've learned over the last year or so, and hopes that maybe it would be helpful for you. So thank you so much for your support to my page. If you're not already subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the like button and the share button, all the buttons. But if you've already subscribed and you haven't hit the notification bell yet, in order to actually know when a video goes live on my channel, you actually have to hit that notification bell. For some reason, it's not enough for YouTube to have you subscribe to the channel. You have to also hit the notification bell to get to know when I actually have a video going live. So go ahead and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys next week.